Fantastic stuff. Thank you very much. My question is, should humanism replace religion? Same question, different conclusion, and we'll see how we go. My name is Tahir Nasser. It's nice to meet you all. So, first of all, I'm going to talk about what religion is. And is somebody timing?
Yes,
So I get 25, 20 minutes, something like that?
Up to 25, up to 25.
Oh, that's good. Okay, excellent. And you've all got to laugh more because you're all being really serious and it's putting me off. Seriously. So, what are the two aspects of religion? We have to know, if the question is, should humanism replace religion, we need to know, what does religion do? Can humanism replace it? So, I can't speak for every religion. I can only speak for my religious belief, which is Islam Ahmadiyya, which is a branch of Islam, a messianic branch of Islam, I might even say. And the two aspects of religion, which are common to all Muslims, and in fact common to all religions actually, are the obligations owed to God and the obligations owed to mankind. Now, the obligations owed to mankind arise out of one's obligations to God fundamentally, insofar as you've been created by God for a particular purpose, and from that arises your relationship to everything that God has created, including human beings, animals, rocks, stones, the sky, aliens, all of things. So, the obligations owed to creation come out of your relationship with God, in a sense. From this, we have to ask a simple question, and this is one of the most important things that a religious person gets from life, is a sense of purpose and direction and meaning. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, if life is an accidental, transient, phenomena, which fundamentally, at some point in time after your death, it will not actually matter whether you even existed or not in an atheistic worldview, insofar as every action you ever made has died, and whether you took this action or that action no longer matters. Then the question is, how much meaning can there really be? An atheist can ascribe whatever they want to the number x. They can ascribe whatever value they want to the number x, but when you multiply it by 0, ultimately the result is 0. And this is something I would argue is something that religion actually provides far better than atheism or any atheistic worldview, which is what humanism is. Humanist morality. Now, there are lots of types of humanism. I was pleased to learn. There's Western humanism, classical humanism, religious humanism. But what we're talking about today is secular humanism, which is a particular branch of humanism, but which has kind of dominated the discourse. So, one of the main examples, and I'm surprised you didn't mention the golden rule, is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, that's a very fundamental core teaching of humanism, and actually, in fact, it is related to many religious philosophies in a particular sense, which I'll discuss. And the second example I've taken from the British Humanist Association website, and this defines humanism. So it's really the middle bullet point, which I'm going to read out, which actually featured in Benjamin's talk as well, which is that a humanist is a person who makes their ethical decisions based on reason, empathy, and a concern for other human beings and other sentient animals. And who could disagree with that? I mean, that's just lovely, isn't it? It's really, it's fluffy and beautiful. But anyway, it's a good idea, and I have to applaud humanists in a way, because actually they're trying to go about and make the world a better place. And that's an important thing. And even if they have a disagreement with religious people on the basis of morality, it's a good thing that people of all denominations and attitudes are trying to form associations to make the world a better place. And that's never a bad thing, ever. So going on from that, the golden rule, I would argue, is actually morally empty. It's not actually a moral it doesn't tell you how to behave. It doesn't actually tell you what right and wrong is. It doesn't actually have any moral substance behind it. And I'll tell you why. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you presupposes that human desires are inherently good. If, for example, I'm a doctor, if I see one of my colleagues neglecting a patient, and I'm called upon by my senior manager, right, and he says, there have been rumours that your colleague has been neglecting patients, has been harming patients, because they're off the wards or in the library or they're downstairs having a coffee half the time. And I think to myself, well, actually, what should I do? Should I tell on him? Should I say, yeah, I've seen that too? What if I think to myself, actually, if I was in his situation, I wouldn't want to be told upon. So what do I do then? Do I lie? Do I cover up his negligence, which is harming people? That would be covered under do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Another example is criminals lying for one another. Honour among thieves. one person gets arrested and he's asked by the police, okay, who did this with you? And he says, all right, Gov, nobody, right? I'm not telling on my friends. You don't like my Cockney? No? Okay, never mind. Another example is cooperative bribery, which is the basis of corruption, which is when you go out your way and you scratch on one person's back in the hope that later they'll scratch yours. You're doing unto them, you're bribing them in the hope that the favour will return to you, because you put yourself in their situation, and you think to yourself, if I was in their situation, if I was bribed, well, I'd want to scratch the other guy's back too. The point is that do unto others as you would have them do unto you is a morally empty philosophy, because it doesn't actually define what is good. And it's actually based upon human emotion and human self-interest. And so when you test the rule, it doesn't actually mean very much. It's a completely subjective standard. And the question really we have to ask ourselves is, why do good to anyone? Now, before I go on to this slide, actually, I don't want you to give the answer away. I want the atheists, if there are in the audience, to answer me this question. I know you are. You're a nice chap. Why would you do good unto somebody? What's the point?
Why not?
That's not my question, though. My question is why. Because we're talking about the motivation for goodness here. So why self-sacrifice your own interest for another person? And I've only got 20 minutes, so we're on top.
Society, for humanity.
You should ask them to define what's good first.
Well, we'll get to that too, but I want to know why should we do good to others? I would say that one of the best answers I've ever heard from an atheist is that, or a humanist, is that you do it to promote the welfare of society. You do it to create a peaceful society around you. But ultimately, really, why is that beneficial? It's beneficial insofar as if you enable somebody else to thrive, you will thrive. Unless it actually comes back to you in an atheistic worldview, what is the fundamental reason to actually promote somebody else's life and their interest? Ultimately, is to create a peaceful, beneficial society in which everybody can thrive. But part of that is so that it comes back to you, so that you can obtain your own desires also in such a society. And I would argue that this is actually self-defeating. If you desire to fulfill your own wishes, and on the basis of that you sacrifice your own desires and your wishes to do good to someone else, with the intention to promote social well-being and happiness in society, which is the stated aim of humanism, only so that you can fulfill your own desires and wishes, well, it's self-defeating. Because why would you give up your own desires in the first place, ultimately only to fulfill your own desires? The question a humanist has to answer is, would they ever do an action which they know repeatedly would never yield them any benefit, but would actually cause active harm to them? And why? Because ultimately, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Now, what is good and evil? See, I told you we'd come to that. Good and evil is just things we say. And what do we mean when we say something's good? What do we mean when we say something's evil? When we look at what's happened in Syria, do we say, when we say it's evil, when we say look at the harm that's caused to people, when we saw Aylan Kurdi's body on the breathing sand on the beach in Turkey, what do we mean when we think that's wrong? Do we mean it's just not very good for society? Do we mean it's just not beneficial for people? Or do we mean it's wrong with a capital W? It's evil with a capital E. There's something fundamentally objective about that thing. In religion, a deed is defined by God's laws. Therefore, the intention is in relation to an objective standard. They're stated. Backbiting is forbidden. Slander is forbidden. Adultery is forbidden. Murder is forbidden. It's stated why, right? And it's given objective standards that the deed is actually forbidden and which deeds are promoted. In humanism, a good deed fundamentally is undefined, and that's very problematic. And it's problematic because, for the very reason I'm going to show you now. Now, these chaps, you may recognise some of them from the Odeon Theatre. How much time do I have, if I may ask? 10 minutes, oh, a bit of hurry. So we have Lord Sauron, the Dark Lord, on the left. We have Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars, top right. Okay. We have bottom left, Darth Vader. I hope you should recognise him. And we have, again, the Dark Lord, Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. There are quite a few overlaps, actually. I think somebody should take it up with J.K. Rowling. But the point I'm making is, that he's the Dark Lord, calling to the dark side, calling to the dark side. Are these villains believable? And I would submit that they're not at all. Because they're all calling to their way of life while representing it as evil. And nobody ever does that. Everybody who ever commits evil does it in the name of goodness. Everybody who does evil does it in the name of goodness. Chairman Mao, Lenin, Stalin, Mussolini, Hitler, these are people who called to great evils in the name of great goodnesses. Economic equality, emancipation of the poor, national and genetic, improvement. Okay? And so all of these things that they did, and the evils that they perpetrated, 50 million people died under Mao's reign. They did it under the guise of good intentions. So simply having good intentions and saying, as the BHA do, that the purpose of humanism is to make ethical decisions based on reason, empathy, and a concern for human beings and sentient animals is actually completely empty. Because I would argue that every single evil person believes that they are doing actions based on reason, based on empathy, a concern for human beings and sentient animals. They believe that they were bettering humanity through their evil. And this is one example. Thou shalt not kill is the teaching of the Torah. And the Hadamar Institute is a testimony to the fact that evils are perpetrated in the name of goodness. This is a quote from a Nazi propaganda video. All that is non-viable in life invariably perishes. We humans have transgressed the laws of natural selection in the last decades. Not only have we supported inferior life forms, but we have encouraged their propagation. And the Hadamar Institute was a place where 15,000 disabled people were sent to their deaths in gas chambers. They were interviewed by medical doctors like myself, who I share their profession. And they, with full knowledge and conscience, they put people to death because they were regarded as genetically inferior. And they were put to death because it was regarded that the doctors were improving the genetics of the humanity. They were, in their eyes, good people for advancing the human race. And so a humanist deed cannot be measured by its intention, because intentions for both good and evil acts are always good. And this is what the Holy Quran states. It states, "Can he who is dead, and we gave him life, and made for him a light whereby he walks among men, be like him whose condition is that he is in utter darkness." In other words, good and evil are the same, always acting in good. Whence he cannot come forth. Thus have the doings of the disbelievers been made to seem fair to them. The actions of people who fundamentally have no compass in their relationship to morals is that they always behave in ways that they think is best. And this is why the Quran is so detailed. It defines what arrogance is. It defines what backbiting is and suspicion, how that leads to harm. It tells you what charity is. It tells you how to behave peacefully. It says, "And the servants of the gracious are those who walk on the earth in a dignified manner. And when the ignorant address them, they say peace." A very different picture of the Muslim that we see today in the media and indeed around the world. And this is other things. This is one example of the fact that a lot of the things we find in religion which are abhorrent are not part of the text of the religion. They're actually created by clerics many, many centuries after the events, and they create them in the name of their own human morals, which is very much what humanism aims to do as well. So this is actually the teaching of the Holy Quran on freedom of speech. When you hear your religion being abused, what should you do? Do you get up and gun them down? No, it's not what it teaches. It teaches, if you hear the signs of Allah being denied and mocked at, sit not with them until they engage in a talk other than that. For in that case, you would be like them. Simply move away. Again, there are verses on freedom of conscience, on women's rights. "O ye who believe, it is not lawful for you to inherit women against their will, nor should you detain them wrongfully, that you should take away part of that which you have given them, and accept that they be guilty of flagrant evil, and consult with them in kindness. And if you dislike them, it may be that you dislike a thing wherein God has placed much good." And I was going to talk about Euthyphro's fallacy, but I think I'm running out of time. But the point I'm making here is that the question is, why do we need these teachings if we already know what good and evil is? That's the question. What's the need to have a book telling you this is good, this is bad, when actually Benjamin could tell me that slander and backbiting is bad. Benjamin could tell me that murder is bad. The reason is because, as I said, everybody justifies evil in the name of goodness. And so what Scripture does is, it doesn't necessarily tell you what's good or bad, but actually, it reminds you. And this is what the Quran calls itself. It says, it is a reminder. It says, we sent our messages with clear signs and scriptures. We have sent down to thee the reminder that thou mayest explain to mankind that which has been sent down to them, and that they may reflect. And so what have we learnt in summary? Good deeds must be defined objectively and cannot be related to human sentiment or human intention, because human intention is always to do good. Since every action is justified in the name of charity, goodness, empathy, concern. And this is what I would say the prophet Socrates, and we can discuss whether he was a prophet of God, but if you read the Apology, he quite clearly claims divine revelation. But he states a system of morality, which is based on relative emotional values, is a mere illusion, a thoroughly vulgar conception that has nothing sound in it and nothing true. And this is one argument I think is very important. May I ask how much time I have? How much time has passed, may I ask?
16 minutes.
16 minutes. So I'm going a bit quickly and I'm getting a very dry mouth. So maybe I should slow down. So why humanism cannot enact reformation? I would argue that all humanism does fundamentally is it preaches to the choir, because the people who join it are actually people who want to do good, which is excellent. And also it can't actually enact reformation, because it doesn't define what is good and bad. It will only ever reinforce what are the stereotypes, what are the mores and the social attitudes within society at that time. Because whatever is in society as most prevalent as good will always be regarded as good, and humanism will not challenge that. So is a moral system that only reinforces one's parents' wrong concept of right and wrong? And you compare this to the lives of the prophets of God. Moses, he stood up, a single voice, to free thousands of slaves. Jesus, against the degenerate clerics of his time. The Prophet Muhammad, against practices like burying your female children alive, against slavery, right? And against the great oppression of women. And through him, women earned the right to divorce, the right to choose whom they wanted to marry, the right to earn property and own property, the right to inherit from their brothers and their sisters and their fathers. So there was a great revolution that was enacted through him. And these were individuals who begun as one person. They did not reinforce the concept which was already prevalent in society and simply call it good. You see, when you tell somebody to be moral, as the humanist philosophy does, it's a statement of intention, but it doesn't tell you what moral deeds are. And this last point I'd really like to emphasize. Humanism takes into account nothing of human psychology. And that is actually that human behavior is fundamentally based on the question of accountability. Now you may not like that. You may not like the fact that humans require accountability often to behave in correct ways. But the fact is that a politician who doesn't have any accountability to his people, you know what we call that? We call that a dictator. When you're driving down the road and you're speeding at 80 miles an hour, and then suddenly you see those line markings on the ground and you see that yellow box, what do? You slow down. I slam on my brakes, make sure I don't get that speeding ticket. That is what human nature is. It's a small experiment, but it shows us that human beings require accountability, at least at the very initial stages of their moral development. And we do this with our children all the time. Parents raise their children through making them accountable, through making them realize what they are accountable to and for. And then there comes an age when they begin to love goodness and good deeds for themselves, in which case they no longer need accountability. And so what religion does is it teaches you right at the beginning, when you're in your moral infancy, and it takes into account all types of human beings, those who are at the lower end of moral spectrum to the highest, and says to the lowest people, yeah, if you commit a bad and evil act and you harm somebody, that will come back to you. And that's why religion is so powerful, and that is why, fundamentally, it has endured, and why it will always endure. Because religion reaches the heart of man. It reaches the mind of man. Humanism can only ever look to the outer aspect of a person's action. But religion, by saying that God can see you, he can see your thoughts, he can see your beliefs, and he will hold you accountable to them, it actually reforms the soil from which actions spring. And this is one of my last slides. I think this is the last slide actually. What is morality then? We've talked about what morality isn't. Morality is always related to your purpose in life, and it's always related to your priorities. A person who wants to be the best doctor or the best lawyer, and they make that their aim in life, they will always sacrifice things so as to achieve that. And they may sacrifice their integrity, they may sacrifice honesty, they may sacrifice the interests of others, because they have made that their purpose in life. So morality in Islam is, and in fact psychologically even, is intrinsically related to what you set as your purpose in life. And the Quran tells us what our purpose in life is in relation to morality. It says, and by the soul and its perfection. And he revealed to it what is wrong for it and what is right for it. He indeed prospers who purifies it, and he who corrupts it is ruined. And then it tells us how to obtain purification and spiritual purification. It says, verily he truly prospers who purifies himself and remembers the name of his Lord and offers prayers. It is through interaction and the development of a relationship with the being in whose nature is implanted in every one of us, which I mentioned also earlier, that actually through interaction with absolute concepts of goodness, of absolute concepts of mercy, and seeking to always make it your priority in life, beyond your career, beyond your relationships, beyond everything else, to please the being whose nature is absolutely perfectly moral and just, and to relate your nature to that nature, and to imitate your nature and model your nature on that nature, making that the purpose of your life, makes that your highest priority. And it is only a person who makes morality and the obtainment of morality their purpose in life, actually the person who is moral at all. And finally, this is my actual last slide. So humanism is actually, in my opinion, self-defeating in a way. Because as I said in the beginning, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to come together and associate and to seek to build a platform for effectively an artificial construct for of objective morality. And that's what humanism is. It's people coming together to create a community, to promote what they believe is right against what they believe is wrong. But they cannot ever tell us why their version of right is actually more right than another person's version of right. If it is simply to benefit society, well, the other person also believes he is benefiting society, for every evil is perpetrated in the name of goodness. If no God exists, there can fundamentally be no reason as to why one moral code is any more valid than another, because there is no overarching purpose to our lives. And yet humanism is a wonderful proof that people still, even despite disbelieving in God, wish to come together to set an arbitrary and an objective set of moral values. And that demonstrates, actually, that they hear the calling in their hearts, but they don't know where it's coming from. Thank you.
Be sure to